Hello everyone, it's 2 o'clock, so we're about ready to start this webinar. It's great that you could all make it today, and it's nice to see some familiar faces or names from last week. This is the second in a 3-part webinar series, so it's great that a lot of you could make it to both or even just this one. To follow on from last week's, today's session is going to be about structuring remote contact time and what adaptations should be considered when moving a course online. Our guest on this subject is King's College reader in Human and Applied Physiology, Dr. James Clark. Over the last 2 years, James has had time to experiment with what does and does not work in a distance learning environment, making adaptations to his programs to maximize student learning. James's background is in cardiovascular physiology, and he has been running the MSc in Human and Applied Physiology at King's since 2012. James saw the potential of online learning platforms early on in his career and has been using these for many years. For this reason, we feel he is very well qualified to discuss this subject, and hopefully you guys will see that too. We have a number of questions for James, which will allow him to go into some detail about his personal experiences and discuss some of his own opinions around online learning. But if you feel you have further questions, please feel free to post them on the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen, or save them until the end where we'll have time for verbal questions. It's also a reminder that this session is being recorded, and we'll be able to circulate that recording after the webinar. James, do you have anything to add before we start?
No, just it's nice to see you, and thank you very much, ADI, for organising these sessions. It's nice to see that there's a company out there trying to replicate maybe what some of us are doing in our institutions to try and get people together to talk about this kind of thing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's begin. So what's been your biggest challenge so far with the move to distance learning?
Well, thanks, Lucy. Just to let everyone know, these questions were posted to me before, so I've had a chance to prepare some answers just in case it suddenly seems like I'm used to doing this kind of interview thing. I think the hardest thing that we've had, and certainly I've had, I've been put into the position of being the departmental digital education lead as well as one of the faculty leads for education. So I've been looking at all of bioscience education at King's. And a lot of my interest obviously is in our department, which is physiology. So part of our biggest problem was getting everybody on board. And part of the getting on boarding is to do with the messaging and the framework that's been put in place. As we all know, COVID has continuously surprised us with turns and changes in the understanding of what we can and can't do with it around. And I think part of the problem has been is that the framework of our governance has been changing on a weekly, if not daily basis. So it's very nice. We come out with these wonderful frameworks. We get our staff on board and we understand what the next phase is. And then the gates move and suddenly we have to completely rethink what we're doing. So part of the biggest problem, I think, has been getting the messaging to our colleagues correct, not telling them what to expect, because part of the problem is you can't expect what you were told yesterday to be happening anymore. So we've had to work very closely with all the different departments and facilities within King's to really get that messaging right. And I don't know if we've got it right. I think we've made some mistakes. We've told people that this will be available and that will be available, and it clearly isn't yet available. And it's now the 23rd of September, and we've got 600 and something or 700 students turning up this week to want bioscience education. That's just one program. And I don't think we're 100% ready for that yet, because the messaging is, again, Boris has told us something different yesterday. And we're going to have to work with that as time comes. So I think getting decisions early, getting the framework early has been the biggest challenge. We've got a large faculty and we've got lots of people across multiple disciplines, and they're all very good teachers. Let's get that straight from the start. These people have been teaching for many, many years. They've been doing it. They're experts in their field. And so there's no doubt that what they're going to deliver and what they want to deliver is top notch. It's just getting the right framework in place so that we know how to deliver it. And personally, my biggest challenge is getting this office that I'm currently sitting actually working in a way that I can do this. I mean, I've got this strange halo around my head just so you can't see my piano behind me and the cat that keeps trying to jump on my shoulders. So I think that's been a challenge as well. Personally, it's been a challenge to get everything in a situation where you can deliver online without it all looking amateur. We don't expect Hollywood. Nobody expects Hollywood, but our students do expect what they've been getting for the last few years. They want good quality education.
Great. Yeah, I don't think anyone expects Hollywood, unfortunately, although that would be nice. You did mention your colleagues then. How do you manage their expectation? And on from that, how do you go about helping those that are maybe more new to online content delivery?
Yeah, I think there are two major problems. The first is the technology. We have transitioned, and they keep calling it the transition period. It sounds a bit weird, but we've all done it in the last 3 or 4 months. And we've all transitioned to a completely new thing. This isn't just a hurdle. This hasn't just been slow steps. This hasn't been, oh yeah, we're now introducing something new. This is a paradigm shift in the way that we're teaching in higher education. And therefore we've had to breach those problems incredibly quickly. I think the way that we have achieved this and the way we've managed, certainly physiology department at King's, which is 40 or 50 academics plus associated technical staff, so it's not a small department by any means. I think we've managed this mostly through peer support. I think peer support has been probably our biggest thing. COVID has taught us a lot of things. It's taught us not to listen to experts. We get told by an expert that this is going to happen, then the opposite happens. And this has been going on since, dare I mention it, Brexit. Lots of things have been told to us by people who think they know everything about it. And then we've realized reality is slightly different to that. So we've worked very closely with our colleagues, and we've set up a peer support network so that members of our team have worked with other members of our team to bring people up to speed. So a few examples of that is we've set up a thing called 11s. We've stolen the idea from another faculty at King's, and essentially every Friday at 11 o'clock, there is an impromptu small group teaching session where we nab a couple of colleagues and we improvise or demonstrate something we can do online, whether it's just using the whiteboard in Teams or demonstrating how to use your USB camera to show things that aren't just your face and a weird background. So we're doing those every week, and they'll be running now, I think, throughout the first semester. As we pick up new ideas, we'll introduce them. And they are run by academics for academics. We don't have any IT experts telling us how to plug microphones in. It's just people like me talking to my colleagues. For those of you who recognize this mug here, you'll see that I've got a YouTube channel that I've been posting to all summer, which is a thing I call tutorials for educators, which is just loads of videos teaching you how to overcome some of the technology hurdles. And that has spread over now throughout the college, and we're all using that kind of medium. Short 2-minute or 3-minute demonstrations of how to do a task, and then you can put them together and do the complete thing from start to end with a bit of help. We've done a lot of one-to-one Teams peer support. So a conversation like this with me and Lucy, with a couple of people watching, we will have a session where one person just simply explains how you use Poll Everywhere, for instance, while doing a PowerPoint presentation live. And a few people will watch in, record it, and then we'll make that available. And the last thing we've done is a showcase. So when anybody has come up with something exciting, new, or good practice, we've tried to showcase that to the whole faculty in some digestible form. So rather than producing pages of PDFs to download, we've simply made an announcement and said, look, this is new. This is something that's happening. If you're interested, contact this person and they'll talk you through how to do it. So that's how we've tried to help people. It's all really been through peer support, because when IT, no offense to IT or digital education teams, when they come up with these wonderful documents that explain how you do things, it's all in jargon, it's all in IT spiel. And I was saying to Lucy the other day, you know, you wouldn't, if you were the director of a program, go and ask the head of IT to explain how to deliver education. You would ask somebody in your team who's done it before, and that's the way we've approached it.
Great, thanks. And for anybody that's interested there, we can circulate James's YouTube channel link at the end of the session, because that sounds like it would be quite useful for people. In your introduction, James, I mentioned that you have been using, you know, online learning tools for some time, and obviously you have experience in that. So how will you use your previous experience to improve the up and coming entirely remote semester?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's very nice of you to say that. I've had some experience and it's been partly successful, let's put it that way. I mean, we've all been, anybody who wants to teach and enjoys teaching uses a blended or whatever learning approach to try and get information to students in a way that's manageable, palatable, and you have some kind of way of getting some formative feedback to them quickly. And certainly I've been using online tools to teach probably for 4 or 5 years now as part of other modules. So I'm certainly not an online teacher full time. I've been teaching in classrooms just like everyone else has, and we've been using tools online to supplement those taught materials. And I guess I've been lucky in that I've managed to use some tools that kind of work, and now those tools are working for us, and it's paying dividends, having some experience previously playing with them. I mean, just little things. I mean, now at King's, we're using Microsoft Teams now to deliver all of our education. And I'm an advocate of new things, but I don't like new things if they're not needed. And about 3 years ago, we were told by the college that Teams was a new thing. Wouldn't it be nice if we used it? And actually, we found it really useful because we're a multi-campus university, and to travel from one campus to another can sometimes take an hour across London. And if you've got an hour-long meeting, that's 3 hours of your day spent just to go to a meeting. So we started using Teams for our regular weekly meetings. And so we're all pretty good now at sharing screens and doing polls and doing the kind of thing that you need to do quickly and efficiently in Teams. So that's been useful. I mean, it's a simple thing. We all use Skype, we've all used Zoom and Teams, but if you've used it in anger, in an environment where people are watching you, it's quite nice to then know that you can do it in front of students and not make a complete fool of yourself the first time you have to share your slides and then end up sharing your email with them, which is what's happened a few times with colleagues. So a kind of the blended approach is not new, but now we've kind of lost the second half of the blend. We've now got a lot of online delivery, a lot of facilitated learning without the ability to sit in a room with a student perhaps afterwards and discuss it with them in any depth. So we're adapting to that. Small group is going to be the way forward, but we're not blessed with the ability to timetable 4,000 small group meetings in a 10-week semester. So we're going to have to improvise. But certainly the small group approach of tutorials and things like that is certainly the way that we're going. I think part of the problem, and we're going to come to this, I'm sure, later, is practicals. We teach physiology. Physiology is a practical discipline. You know, everything in physiology is backed up with either a practical demonstration, a practical experience, or simply going into a lab and going, that's the thing I was talking about in my lecture, have a poke. And we can't do that necessarily now. And so that's kind of where the online blended pre-learning formative stuff is going to come into its own now, so we can use that to help deliver some of the stuff that we can't do in person. But you know, I'm not looking forward to 3 days time when my program kicks off, but equally I'm not dreading it entirely, because I think we do have what we need to push forward, maybe.
And of course, it's a huge change for you staff, but for any students, especially returning students, it's a huge change for them. How have you managed to manage student expectation?
Yeah, well, again, we've got two groups of students, as you just mentioned them. We've got the returning students. So the year 1 and year 2 students are coming back to do their year 2 and year 3 respectively, or year 4, depending on if they're doing a 4-year course. And, you know, they've encountered COVID already. It hit them in March and they've already had online exams and they're used to Teams meetings. So for them, they all seem pretty happy that they've got the right message. They know what to expect. Life will continue as it did over the summer for them. And I'm not personally worried too much about them. I've got a lot of personal tutees and we've spoken all summer about it. And I've been gearing them up to getting used to this. The concern that we have is for the new students. We've got 2 cohorts of students now turning up, the first year undergraduate level 4 students that have just been through the strangest experience of their academic life by being given A-levels without having to sit an exam. And we're not going to give them a degree without sitting exams. So they're going to turn up at King's and we're still going to examine them on things, and they're still going to be faced with critique and appraisal and feedback that they haven't received over the summer. So I think they're going to be hitting this quite hard. And then we've got the postgraduate students that have just finished a degree in another institution who handled COVID in one way, and now they're coming to our institution where we're maybe handling it in a different way. And they may not fully understand the nature of it. I won't mention any universities by name, just in case anyone's on the call that gets offended, but there are universities that have already announced that they are teaching face-to-face. And they may well have students that are coming to us from those universities who really weren't affected that badly by COVID. But unfortunately, we're not teaching face-to-face in semester one, certainly. And therefore, they're going to suddenly be hit with a new way of learning. And I feel a bit sorry for them in that respect. But we've been keeping the messaging going. And again, I said this in answer to your first question, messaging is so important. And we've got 3 levels of messaging. We've got our own institution messaging, we've got our own program and course level messaging, and then on top of that, overriding all of that, we've got country, domicile country, or even country of destination messaging. And, you know, I feel for students who are coming here from abroad who just don't understand how England is different to perhaps somewhere in Central Europe, and how we're coping with this. And given what we've been told in the last couple of days, we may be going somewhere slightly different in the next month or so. So let's see how that copes. But we've been trying to keep them up to speed. For instance, on our programs, the ones that I'm running, we've already given them an induction on all of their online learning tools. We've given them access to all the online resources they need. We've even given them some formative work to do in advance of enrollment so they can get going and get used to the e-learning environment so it's not a big shock to them. And I mentioned Teams before. We've had Teams meetings informally with all of our offer holders just to have a chat with them, give them the opportunity to see what it's going to be like in education. You know, luckily, none of those Teams meetings resulted in students withdrawing their applications. They've all continued to want to come to King, so maybe it worked. But communication has been very complicated and really not helped by changes in institutional policy week by week. And no offense to King's, and I'm sure it's the same in other institutions, the staff don't get told what the students are getting told until after the students have been told. And the hundreds of emails have come in from offer holders questioning various things. So that's been a little bit of a problem, but I guess it's the same everywhere.
I'm sure it is. So you mentioned that communication has been complicated, and you've already mentioned Microsoft Teams. Can you tell us a bit about what tools you've made use of to facilitate this move?
Well, I mean, we're a big institution. I think it's in the 50s or 60s of thousands of students enrolled at King's, and therefore we are pretty much tied to what the college tells us to use. The financial implications, for instance, of us all going out and buying licenses for Zoom would probably cripple the university. So we are stuck using Teams, we are stuck using our Moodle e-learning platform, and that is what we use throughout all the faculties at King's. So that's it. You can't go beyond that unless you've got a bit of imagination. So we have taken advantage of some free offers over the summer. Kudos to AD Instruments, for instance, for making LT available to everyone over the summer to give them a taster of what could be possible if you wanted to use that kind of system. But other people have done the same. So some of the big publishing houses have made their virtual textbooks and online learning materials available over the summer. And it's been an interesting experience dipping in to 5 or 10 different opportunities. I mean, there are some, and again, I don't want to offend anybody, but there are some online learning tools that are frankly not worth paying a penny for because they don't offer you anything that you can't pick up watching YouTube videos. But there are others that are incredibly good. Unfortunately, they cost a lot of money. And when you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of student enrollments, you've got to be very careful about what you get overexcited about, put your application into the faculty and then get it turned down. And that's happened on a few occasions. We've had module leads for big programs being told, sorry, you can't have that online resource that you were actually begging 2 months ago. So we've made use of what we've got, and we have made use of a few interactive online textbooks that we're luckily subscribed to, and the library's been very proactive in getting those paid for. It wouldn't be right for me not to mention LT again, because this is an ADI sponsored event, but we have used LT and we will be using LT, and we'll be using LT to deliver some practical components and we're doing at the moment for some formative pre-enrollment work using their ready-made tutorials as well as some of our own tutorials. We've learned the tools that can be done with LT, and we're using it for other stuff like statistics quizzes and quick fire answers and sessions during lectures. So it's working quite well for us in that respect. Equally, for those who use an e-learning platform, Blackboard, Moodle, all the others, they all have a very similar functionality. You can do quizzes, you can do short answer questions, and you can do multiple choice questions, but we just like the drag and drop pictorial view that you can get with some of these platforms. So we're sticking with those at the moment. And thankfully, we've managed to secure enough licenses for that to keep us going throughout the first year at least.
Great, thank you. So now this question is probably the biggie of the interview. So how have you managed to continue teaching a practical course online, and what format is that contact time looking like?
So now's the time I wish my broadband would just go down and I'd disappear down a black hole and not have to answer that question. As I said before, physiology. I'm going to talk about physiology, although I've been involved in nutrition, pharmacology, biochemistry, chemistry, and physics in the last couple of months, trying to help them out as well. Yeah, practicals, hey. I run a master's program where the entire second semester is based on 1 week practical projects. So if those people out there are worried about their 1 day practicals or their 3-hour practicals, please feel for me, because I have to do all of that next semester. But this semester, we are really concerned with getting some practical physiology taught to students, and there is no supplement. We drew up this really complicated faculty flow diagram of how you could supplement this practical with an online thing, that practical with an online thing, that practical with nothing, that practical with something else. And it doesn't work, because you cannot substitute the experience that the student needs to get in the laboratory. So what we have tried to do is we've broken down practicals into the 3 core components. We've broken them down into the learning objectives. What does the student need to learn from this practical? Is plugging the wire in essential, or is just doing the measurement and seeing what happens when you do something to your subject? Is that the important step? But it could be the wire plugging in is the most important step, because it's a first year practical and they've never seen a wire before. So we've broken down practicals all across the physiology programs and looked at them and thought, right, what are the learning objectives? What are the key take home messages? And how can we deliver that? We have replaced some practicals with just a tutorial. We've gone into the lab, we've recorded the wire, we've recorded the demonstration of how it works and where it goes and what it plugs into and what it looks like. And then we're using those pictures or images instead of a still image you might use in a lecture. So normally in a lecture, you may be going, hi, tomorrow we're measuring ECG. Here's a picture of an ECG electrode. Pa-dang, move on. This time, we're not just showing a picture, we're showing a video of it, and we're showing how it's used and how it's applied. And that's going to replace the practicals, because you can't get 690 students into a lab to do an ECG practical when the lab holds 6 students. I've done the maths. I mean, I don't need a PhD to work that one out. You can't physically do it in the timeline that we've got between now and Christmas. And that's just 1 out of 5 practicals we need to deliver for our first year physiology students. So let's do it simply. PowerPoint presentation, interactive tutorial. There is a caveat to that. For those who know me, I'm a bit of a geek, and here on my desk next to me, I have a Power Lab system. I've got cameras, I've got lights, and I can do practicals from home and demonstrate basic practical skills. And that's one of my plans. I'm going to get small groups and I'm going to show them how these things work. Rather than doing a video, I'm actually going to show them real time. And if they want to ask questions and say, what happens if I plug it into the other hole? I can show them. I can then walk them through the software. So that's my separate plan. The second way of delivering these lectures, these videos, is to record a skill. So we're recording an intervention of some kind, and then we're going to be using that in tutorials to show the students. And then the last thing we're going to do is record, we said it's not Hollywood, but we're recording full 12 to 15 minute practical classes from start to finish. So for instance, for some nutrition things we're doing at the moment, we're getting cabbages, we're chopping them up and we're measuring the vitamin C content in them, which is an hour-long experiment. And we're breaking that down into the key components and showing them a vignette of each of the steps so that students can watch that. And then we give them the real data and they can analyze it. It is no substitute for lab work in that it doesn't replace the lab work. But if we can't get them in the lab, we're going to try and do as much as we can to show them what a lab looks like and how a lab works. Bear in mind also, Lucy, that we've got year 1, year 2, year 3 and postgrad students on board. The postgrad students have been in many labs. They know what they look like, so we can be a little bit more flexible with them. Whereas first year students, I think, need to see things bit by bit. And then the last thing we're doing in practicals, which I think is the only way of doing this, is to set up a way of teaching live. At the moment, we, like most institutions, are still on the 2+ meter rule. So that's 2 meters plus PPE if you're in closed space, and based on what Boris said yesterday. Who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. We have lab spaces where we can sit 6 students or stand 6 students socially distant and have access to a piece of kit. So these are large sports science labs that have been designated. And our intention is to set them up as essentially as a broadcast studio for practicals. So if students can attend, if they're in London, for instance, they can attend, they can be in the room, they can see the actual thing being done. They may be able to interact if it's a case of pressing a button on a keyboard or wearing PPE and applying a sensor. They can do that as long as safe distancing is adhered to. And then those students that either aren't in London, can't be in London, vulnerable students, for instance, who just can't risk being attending these things, or students that are still in their home domicile country, they will be able to log in live, see the practical, give us some feedback, ask us questions. We'll have a roaming camera, a video mic, everything done properly so that students will be able to see what's going on. We are faced with that dilemma though. How many of these can we do? How often can we do them? And how many students will benefit? And I'm very selfish. I run a master's program with 23 students on. They're going to benefit. The 700 odd students doing bioscience may not get the best out of that because it's just no time to get them all through. So I think that's how we're approaching practicals. I think it's a discussion that we could actually go on for hours and hours about the dilemma concerned with that. But needless to say, we've been filming for the last few weeks, and I think a lot of other people have. Twitter is alive with physiologists with cameras. It's been amazing watching all the different physiologists from around the country armed with their smartphones and video cameras and lighting rigs filming people doing various things. And I think it's brilliant to see them being done. And I don't think we all realize what an amazing resource we're putting together here without realizing it. I mean, it's brilliant. We're going to have a collection nationally, globally, of hundreds and hundreds, hopefully really well produced, accurate, good quality physiology videos. And maybe we can make use of them in the future as well. And certainly I'll be making use of all of ours. I've spent a lot of time. I'm not going to think about it. And certainly across institutions, I think we need to get together. Certainly the Physiological Society has thought about this, and we've had meetings to discuss this, how we can pool resources. And so any institution that may not have access to equipment, we can then feed into that and provide them, hopefully with some useful footage. We'll see how it goes. Maybe ADI want to take the lead on that and start putting together, in addition to what they've already put together for LT, a whole load of new practical demonstration videos.
We'll have to put that to our suggestion board, I think.
Well, I've suggested lots of things to your suggestion board, and they all disappear into a black hole. So maybe this one will get noticed.
Let's hope so. Thanks, James. I think that's some really useful tips there. And you're right in that on Twitter, there seems to be an array of interesting physiology videos materializing. So, I mean, hopefully students around the world find that useful. So finally, just to sum up, as we're coming to the end of this sort of interview phase, can you please tell us what your top 3 tips are for educators looking to implement distance learning?
Okay, I'm going to be crass to start with, and then I'll be sensible afterwards. I think practice is number 1, practice is number 2, and number 3, very closely to the first 2, is practice. I do mean that. I've had the luxury of having kit around me and colleagues who are willing, and a very, very patient partner who is willing for me to demonstrate things to her and on her when it comes to physiology. And we've been practicing a lot over the summer. Go through things with a critical colleague. Don't go through things with your best friend who will go, oh, it's amazing, well done. Go through things with somebody who is going to say, I don't understand what you're trying to teach me here. And you want people to critique your work and be as brutal as they can, because the audience you're going to have are undergraduate students, and we know what they're like. We know that they will just take on board everything you say and go, okay, that's the way we do it. Or they'll complain, or they'll just go, I don't know what's going on. We have a whole spectrum of normally distributed students. So use a colleague who will sit there and go, I don't get it. I don't think this is suitable. I don't like what you're doing. Or, well done, what you're doing is brilliant. Carry on, change it, don't change it. And I think that's really important. So keep it simple would be my second suggestion. So peer support, number 1. Keep it simple, number 2. Just because your practical or your lecture or your online thing has a list of learning objectives as long as an A4 sheet of paper, don't try and achieve them all in one session. The other day, we tried to do some breakout groups and micro teaching sessions. We allocated 40 minutes for 4 groups to talk about 3 things. We all came back to the main room having not discussed anything, because all they'd had was technical problems trying to get into a breakout room, get their microphones working, get out of the breakout room. One of them disappeared off into nowhere and couldn't find the meeting again. And if you're doing this as a live thing with students and you lose half your students and you lose the point, you're not going to achieve anything. So small, short sessions with small, easy to use and easy to follow learning objectives, I think, is the only solution. Certainly, I mean, I'm lucky. Physiology, the whole nature of physiology is it breaks down into really small things that you can explain really simply and then move on. I feel for people who are talking about law. I mean, I don't understand that, but you know, to explain a concept may take a little bit longer, but physiology is really good. You can break things down into really simple steps and explain it with a picture, a video, or just some waffle in front of some students and get them on board. And the last thing is, don't go off topic. I gave a lecture the other day. Yeah, and I started answering questions middle of the lecture, and students started posting things on the chat, and I got awfully involved. And suddenly 45 minutes was up and I only got to slide 3 of my presentation because I was getting dragged into all these off-topic things. And if you're going to get live teaching, and one of the picture of what's going to happen certainly at King's is that we're going to have a mixture of pre-recorded material, live material, and hopefully face-to-face material. For the live material, if you've got that peer, that colleague that was willing to be rude to you earlier and critique, get them on the session if they've got time, invite them into the session and they can sit there and help you. Today, for instance, Lucy's there doing the whole broadcast thing with me with a nice backdrop, but in the background, there are lots of little ADI minions running around making sure this runs smoothly, and they'll be fielding questions and posting things and doing things like that. If you're trying to do this single-handedly, you're almost destined to fail because it's very hard to do the whole thing single-handedly. So use help. If you can get GTAs, use them. If you can get PhD students, use them. Appreciate all your postdocs have probably been on furlough all summer and they're desperate to get back into the lab. But if they've got a free hour, they can always watch you crash and burn and help you in your live sessions. So I think that's it. Practice, a critical colleague, and stick to your learning objectives. 3 main points.
Thank you. And thank you for making that response quite entertaining as well.
Sorry.
Okay, so thanks very much, James. Everything you've said so far is very interesting. I'm not an educator, but I'm sure everybody listening would have found it very helpful. We do have some time for questions. So I have seen that there's some in the chat and the Q&A function, which is great. We can get started on those. If anybody wants to ask a question verbally, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. And we can then invite you to unmute. So you have to click that button and then you have to unmute yourself in the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom screen. So hopefully some people can manage that and then we can get some good verbal questions going. If that's too much hassle, then just type your question in the chat or Q&A function. We can get to them that way. Okay. James, are you in the Q&A?
I'm on everything. I'm trying to read the chat and the Q&A and manage my email all at the same time. So I'm doing exactly what I told you not to do a minute and a half ago. I'm just reading through the chat first. They're easier to answer quickly because there's lots of little questions. There's a email or a comment here from Isabel, who's a physiology teacher in Lisbon, Portugal, who wants to exchange some ideas and has given me her personal email address. I fully condone sharing information with people, and I'll be happy to email you or email me, Isabel, no problem. And I think really there should be a forum for this. It's a bit late now. We start teaching this week, but I think there should be an open forum where people can talk about these things. Yassine Sun already hates online teaching. I'm really sorry. Come to King's, we make it more interesting. And then we've got a few more questions. Anything down here? Yeah, delivering practicals. Again, Isabel's back. Regarding the videos, she says, are you doing them or using external resources? Again, people who know me know I'm a bit of a geek. So I've got my own gimbal, I've got my own Steadicams, I've got my own 4K cinema recorders. So sadly, I'm doing it all myself. And it's taking a long time and many evenings are spent sitting in Final Cut Pro trying to adhere to the strict rules that I've been sent by my colleagues about I wanted exactly 3 minutes and 14 seconds, or etc. But yeah, I'm doing it myself. We do have an AV department at King's, but the AV department at King's is a group of 3 people who go around campus taking photographs of celebrities when they turn up, and they're really not used to taking advice. Quick thing on videos, we didn't talk about video production, but I've got some advice for people thinking about videos. Back to my advice about doing everything, keep it simple. Cut down as many learning objectives as possible and make it the simplest thing you can do. And create a storyboard. I know no one's used to creating storyboards. No one knows what a storyboard is, but essentially it's just a list of shots, what I need to shoot at, what do I need a picture of, what do I need a video of, who needs to do it, when they need to do it, and what they need to do. And if you do that and follow it, believe me, you can get a really good product very quickly with the minimal amount of effort, because you're only making recordings of actually what you want. You're not making recordings of things that you don't want. And Duncan Banks has just popped up say that, do I add the content to Moodle myself? Yeah, we have to do everything ourselves, Duncan. I'm sorry, at King's we are faced with doing our own recordings, uploading them, transcoding them, creating captions for them, and then putting them onto our own Moodle pages. And inevitably, there are even more technological hurdles getting that working, because we're using the Moodle plugin Kaltura. I need say nothing more. Okay, can I go over to the Q&A just to answer those questions? Is that all right?
Yeah, just while you look at those, there is an interesting one from Duncan in the chat a bit further up. How do you cope with the use of copyright material? So I thought that one was quite an interesting one, if you have anything to say.
I'm assuming, I mean, maybe Duncan wants to come and ask that in a bit more verbose style on the microphone, but I'm assuming he's meaning with, there we are, he's raised his hand, let him in. I'm assuming, Duncan, you're meaning the use of other people's material in your teaching.
Yeah, exactly. So nowadays you can easily do that when you're in a lecture theatre in front of a group of up to 300 people, but you're putting someone else's stuff online where not just a student but many other people can see it. So how do you cope with that?
Well, we've been told we're not allowed to do it, so that's how we've coped with it. It's a draconian measure, and I'm pretty sure that what we're going to end up doing is on our Moodle pages there'll be our lecture, and then underneath our lecture will be lots and lots and lots of links to external resources, so you can watch those materials on somebody else's ownership site. So if it's a YouTube or a video on Jove or something like that, we'll just link straight to it. We're in the same position as you because we are providing an asynchronous style for many of our lectures. So we're recording them as MP4s and uploading them to a video streaming server. And as you say, the way that Moodle works, and I don't understand why this is, pretty much anybody in the university can find those videos and play them back unless they're very well secured. And it's a real problem, Duncan. How have you?
Can I ask a question now? Now the two of us are talking. It's all very well you having the skills to do this, but I'd imagine that some of your colleagues may not have the same skills as you. So is this putting more pressure on them, given us the change in circumstance that all academics have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to upsell myself or anything. We've sat down with the whole physiology department and we selected 5 modules across our range of modules. We run 35, 40 modules, and we chose 5. One that was mostly lecture based, one that had a mixture of lectures, seminars, etc. One that was mostly practical based, the usual thing. And we went down, the head of department, myself, and a few other the digital education people sat down with each of those leads and worked out how their module worked. And in some cases, we were lucky and we said, right, we've got some resources. We will put some resources into getting your videos working. We'll help you with that. We'll help you with that. But we've tried to be as generous and as broad as possible. I am sadly the only one in physiology at King's doing videos. And so I'm Muggins here is just going back and forth to London with a camera filming a lot. And you're right, there aren't many people that are either prepared, stupid enough, or willing to do that kind of thing. So you are in a sense making some of the other modules lesser because they're not able to get access to the higher material. But I think we're trying to be as broad as possible within our own department. And I think if you've got one person who's good at one thing, get them doing it if they're willing, because I'm certainly not good at half the stuff and I'm getting other people to do that with me and for me. So I think play on your strengths. So if you've got people in your department who are good at one thing, and we're in it together, we're going to do far more work this year than we've done any other academic year of our careers, absolutely sure. And not going to get rewarded for it. So we've just got to do it, I think, if we want our modules and our programs to work the way we want them to.
Thanks, James. Could we move on to perhaps some of the Q&A questions?
Absolutely. So we've got, what's my opinion regarding fully asynchronous teaching? Well, we're not doing it. We're not doing fully asynchronous teaching. As soon as COVID hit, undoubtedly a lot of members of staff didn't come forward and make their opinion known, but I know the general rumbling was, oh, that's great, we'll just use last year's lecture capture recordings and that's our year delivered. And then a few people thought, well, hang on a second, if they do that this year, that means that every year from now on, I'm not required as an academic. So we decided that wasn't a good idea. And we decided that we'd have to rehash every program, every module with a new content. Every module and every program has been redesigned to make it work online. And we are doing a mixture. So anonymous attendee, first question, basically we are doing a mixture in every module we deliver. We are promising and delivering, we hope, some asynchronous work, some of the more dull, lecture type material is being done in that format. We're having a mixed mode, either live, so there'll be some students in the room and some students online, or all through Teams events where we're going to be having a tutorial workshop type session, and then there will be face-to-face teaching, whether it's practical or whatever. The university, and I saw Heather pop up, some universities have said things to different people, and I know that King's has said to our students that they are expecting each module to get 3 hours a week of face-to-face teaching. That may not happen. We don't know if we can actually do that or not. Other universities have said 6 hours a week. So I think we have to be really careful what we tell our students and what we're able to achieve. But we're doing a full blended approach. We're not going to go down a single module just being online. It's not appropriate at this level. I think it's fine if that's what you're set up to do, but not if you're charging students a full fee for it. Richard, so I've answered that one. Richard says, do I mainly use off the peg LT lessons? Yeah, the LT lessons that are off the peg are cracking. Sometimes they need a little bit of tweaking, editing, removing of bits that may be not part of your learning objectives, but you can do that just by pressing the delete button. And we add our own stuff. They've nicely sandwiched a lot of really good lessons from start to finish, and you've got all the bit in the middle that you can add your own pages to and add your own learning objectives. So if there's something you've delivered in your lecture and you want to use some of their stuff as either a pre or post lecture formative assessment, use it, because it's there, you've paid for it, you might as well use it. And then you can sandwich in maybe some specific questions to your lecture, maybe include some of the images or some of the descriptors that you've used in your own lectures to make it look more personal. Students don't notice. They won't know that it's not your stuff. If you ask the nice guys at AD, they'll send you the color codes of all of the colors they use in their LT scripting, so you can make your graphics look the same and fit with the mode. So it won't suddenly go from beautiful, beautiful, beautiful to some hand-drawn nonsense and then back to beautiful again. And it's really good. I've been playing in Illustrator using their graphics and using my graphics, and you can make them match up and look very nice. So a bit of everything. But equally, we've made a whole load of bespoke lessons. People from all over the faculty are making their own lessons from scratch based on their own teaching experience. I mean, AD, they've done a lot of work, but you don't expect them to cover every single university's curriculum. That's pretty tough. So that's Richard. He's asked another supplementary, clever one, Richard. Supplementary question: roughly what proportion of staff involved in teaching have engaged with LT? It's kind of the LT roadshow. LT, well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modules within our school and faculty using LT, ranging from first year medicine, MBBS, not the usual stuff, not the case studies, not the clinical stuff, but actually some of the preclinical science, some of the cognition science, some of the sensory science that isn't included very much in LT. They've written their own stuff for that to teach the medics. Imaging. The 3D imaging science team have created a whole load of lessons to look at 3D rotation of objects and how you can, answer the simple questions. And you can't do that in Moodle. There's no way in Moodle of using objects that you can move around. So LT helps with that. You can't do 3D stuff in LT, but you can do some drag and drop stuff. So we're doing that. And we've got, I think there's about 7 or 8 staff actively engaged in authoring new LT stuff. So not bad. Jeff, watching videos will be an interesting learning experience. But a chemist said to me over the summer, you can show a student lots of videos, but how to count nitric acid, but he'll still pour it in his eye, essentially, when he goes into the lab. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree entirely, Jeff. You cannot show people good laboratory practice on a video, because it just won't work. We are trying very hard in some of our videos to incorporate mistakes on purpose. We are incorporating the wrong way to wire somebody up for an ECG, or the wrong way to apply filtering in Power Lab system, or the wrong way to do a sit-stand test or whatever. But then we're showing them the right way. So we're trying to do some corrective learning built into the artificial, based on our experience of teaching those practicals. You know, you teach a practical enough times, you have a data bank in your brain of all the mistakes that students commonly make, and you try and incorporate them. In terms of safety in the lab, there's absolutely no way of teaching that very well. I'm going to mention Labster here. Labster is an online learning platform for science, which I believe, and again, if anyone from Labster's on the call, I apologize, it's not really for postgraduate or undergraduate teaching. It's more like A-level, but it's actually quite good because there's lots of really boring, repetitive stuff. You know, you go into the lab and it won't let you continue until you've clicked on the sanitizer and clicked on the gloves and clicked on the visor and clicked on the lab coat. And by the time you've done that 100 times, when you walk into the lab for the first time, you'll be looking to click on all these things in order to do it. But it is no substitution. And I think we have to get students in labs. At the very least, what we're going to try and do is get all student cohorts into a lab at some point, even if it's just to walk around and experience what it is to be in a lab. But bear in mind, second and third year students hopefully have already done that in year one, and it won't be such a big thing for them, but they do need to get into the lab. So I'm with you. It applies to every discipline, and we've got to get students at some point experiencing things. I mean, I'm tempted to send, there it is. I'm tempted to send students home with things like this. They're only 15 quid from Amazon. You know, I'm happy to buy 20 or 30 of those and post them out to students so they can get some experience with interfacing with biology. Otherwise, they're just watching videos all year. But we'll see how that goes.
Sorry, James, we are overrunning, so there is two more questions on the Q&A, so we may as well just do those, and then we might have to call it a day. That's okay.
Abby, nice to hear from you too. Advice on creation of better automatic subtitles? No. If you're using Kaltura, the subtitles are atrocious. Their dictionary they use is American and also totally inadequate. We found that Microsoft Stream generates better captions. It's got a slightly better biological caption maker, but you have to edit them anyway. We've come up with all sorts of innovative solutions. Getting one computer to dictate to another computer over a microphone is quite a fun one. You can use internal audio routing to get Microsoft Word to listen to your PowerPoint presentation and write down the dictation. That works quite well. The University at King's has just announced that it's putting £1 million into making of captions. That sounds brilliant until you work out that £1 million only pays for about 10,000 hours of captioning, and 10,000 hours won't cover our teaching for the first 3 weeks of term college-wide. So I don't know how that's going to work, but Abby, email me and I can send you some ideas. And Colin, another ex-colleague, nice to hear from you. In silico physiological studies, yeah, they can. If they're not doing it and not thinking, and everything is rote learning, they're not going to learn the tricks of the trade. They're not going to learn the shortcuts, the ways around it, the troubleshooting, and we're going to have to incorporate that somehow. But I think I've just answered your question. Yes, I did.
Perfect. Thanks for that, James. What was that? Sorry.
We only ran over by a few minutes. That's not bad.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're happy to, I'm sure we could share both your YouTube channel and your contact information of this if you're happy to, in case people have more questions to ask offline. But I mean, we really appreciate what you've done today. You know, you've opened up a whole new realm of experience in this online teaching, which I found very interesting, and I'm sure lots of people have learned something from. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you everyone for attending and for asking questions. It's nice to have that interactivity. Just a reminder for our final webinar of the series next week. That's more about specifically LT and how to deliver some of the online elements that James has mentioned today within our online learning platform. That will be hosted by our LT success managers from the US and Europe. So please feel free to tune into that. And that's it for today.
Brilliant.
So
Well, thank you, Lucy and AD, for inviting me. It's been fun. And as Lucy said, if anyone wants to get in contact with me, I don't have any answers. I will just generate more questions for you. But it's nice to have a chat about these things.
perfect. Great. Well, thanks very much, everybody. I believe Kat has posted the link for last week's session in the chat. Kat or James, could you also post your YouTube channel in the chat perhaps before we leave the call?
I will do that before the call ends. I'm going to mute my camera so you can waffle for a few seconds.
If
Perfect.
you like, I have email registrations from everyone in the school today, so I can email people who've attended the school with your YouTube channel, James, and your email, as well as links to where I am going to be uploading this session on YouTube. So we don't have to be doing stuff in a hurry right now, if that's better for people.
Yeah, okay, perfect. That'd be great. Thanks, Kat. So thank you everybody for attending, and hope to see some of you next week.